Rain lashed against the windows. Clara sipped her tea, a book resting in her lap. She glanced at the clock, almost midnight. Her husband Mark was late again. Probably working late at the office, she murmured to herself, a familiar pang of loneliness echoing in her heart. Clara lived in a comfortable suburban home, a life she had always dreamt of. Yet, a persistent emptiness lingered beneath the surface. Her marriage, once a source of joy, had become predictable routine. The spark, it seemed, had faded. She peered out the window again, watching the storm rage. A flash of lightning illuminated a lone figure huddled on the sidewalk across the street. A homeless man seeking shelter from the downpour. Clara felt a familiar tug at her heartstrings. Compassion, always her weakness, urged her to act. Clara grabbed an old umbrella and a warm blanket. She crossed the street, her heart pounding with a mix of apprehension and determination. "Excuse me!" she called out over the howling wind. The man looked up, startled. His face was weathered, etched with hardship, yet his eyes held a spark of kindness. "I couldn't help but notice you're out in this terrible weather," Clara said, her voice trembling slightly. "I brought you a blanket." The man hesitated for a moment, then accepted the blanket with a grateful nod. "Thank you, ma'am," he mumbled, clutching the warm fabric close. "My name is Daniel." They stood in silence for a moment, the rain beating down around them. Clara felt an unexpected connection with this stranger, a shared humanity that transcended their differences. "Daniel," Clara began, surprising even herself, "would you like to come inside? You can't possibly stay out here all night in this weather." Daniel looked at her, his eyes wide with surprise. "I wouldn't want to impose," he stammered. "I'm sure you have a family." "My husband is working late," Clara said quickly, brushing aside any thoughts of what Mark might say. "Please, it's the least I can do." Daniel hesitated for a moment longer, then nodded slowly. "Thank you, ma'am, you're very kind." Clara led him back across the street, her heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. She had never done anything like this before, but something about Daniel, a certain vulnerability in his eyes, had touched her deeply. Clara made Daniel a cup of hot tea and a simple meal. He ate slowly, his eyes downcast, as if embarrassed by her generosity. As he ate, he told her about his life, the loss of his job, the downward spiral that had led him to the streets. Clara listened intently, her heart heavy with sympathy. She had always been a good listener, a trait that had drawn people to her throughout her life. But with Daniel, it was more than just listening. She felt a deep sense of connection, a shared understanding of life's fragility. Days turned into weeks, and Daniel became a fixture in Clara's life. He helped around the house, doing odd jobs and keeping her company. He was quiet and respectful, always grateful for her kindness. Clara, in turn, found herself confiding in him, sharing her own loneliness and her growing dissatisfaction with her marriage. One evening, while Daniel was out running errands, Clara found a small, leather-bound notebook tucked under the cushion of the couch where he often sat. She hesitated for a moment, then curiosity got the better of her. Opening the notebook, she discovered it was filled with Daniel's handwriting, poems, stories, and journal entries. She began to read, drawn in by the raw emotion in his words. He wrote of love, loss, and the pain of betrayal. As she turned the pages, a particular entry caught her eye. It was a poem addressed to C. The poem spoke of a love that was forbidden, a secret affair that had consumed him. Clara's heart skipped a beat. Could this be about her? She dismissed the thought as absurd, and yet a seed of doubt had been planted. That night, Mark came home late as usual. He seemed distant, preoccupied. Clara, her mind racing with suspicions, decided to confront him. "Mark," she began, her voice trembling, "who is C?" Mark froze, his face draining of color. "What are you talking about?" he stammered. Clara's eyes filled with tears. "Don't lie to me," she whispered, her voice thick with betrayal. "I know about the affair." Mark's shoulders slumped, he sank into a chair, burying his face in his hands. "It's not what you think," he mumbled, but Clara knew the truth. The look on his face, the guilt in his eyes spoke volumes.